Hello again, everyone. My name is Ebony Monet, and I'm excited to be bringing my second new video to the channel. And today's topic is going to be about how I got into science to begin with. So in the spirit of that, I did wear my Black Scientists Matter shirt. Absolutely love this shirt. It's so beautiful. So first of all, I feel like this is a very special process, like getting into science, because there is no right or wrong way to do it. Some groups, of course, are going to have easier access to that. Maybe they have a parent that's a researcher, et cetera, et cetera. However, for me, I did not understand how to get into research really. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that on my journey today. I'm also looking at doing some different interviews with PIs or friends of mine that are also either PhD researchers currently or training PhDs, and that would be really interesting. Be sure to leave a comment down below because I would definitely love to interview some people. I just don't know, priority as far as. So growing up, I have always been a very curious child. I think that is partially due to me growing up with eczema. So eczema or atopic dermatitis is a chronic skin condition where you end up just developing rashes, and it's just they're just all over the place. There's allergy triggers, there's different things that might help it, but I've been through a lot of it. I've literally had it since I was a baby. So that was really my first introduction to science, because my allergist was one of the main people I would ask questions to. I would ask her how does this work, or why is my skin like that, or why do people ask about it, just asking her questions. And she would spend so much time just trying to explain to me what this was. Mind you, I was third, fourth grade asking her these questions about hey, how come my body is caught having these reactions to things it shouldn't be reacting to, right? And that was just a very insightful time for me and just piqued my curiosity even more. From this insight, I started doing my own research. I did my own background research as a child, just looking at documentaries and different things or videos that just got me excited about just science in general. I was so interested in understanding how the body just works because of that interaction I used to have with my allergist, just talking to her and understanding oh, my body's basically attacking itself, but it thinks it's something foreign, right? And that's something that's very unique in itself, and I wanted to understand more about that even as a child. I also had a mom that was a biomedical engineer or a biomed tech. She worked at a hospital, so she was just responsible for a lot of the repairs, basically running the shop, if you want me to be completely honest. And I feel like she's another reason why I really got interested in science, because I used to go into work with her sometimes and watch her repair equipment. And even though I wasn't really interested in engineering type things, I found it very cool that my mom just worked in a medical profession without having to work directly with patients and was able to make an impact in that kind of way. Also, another thing that's really important about my background, I grew up in a little city called Titusville, Florida. If it does not ring a bell, that is okay. Another name for the area is called the Space Coast. I lived 20, 30 minutes from the Kennedy Space Center growing up my entire life. I heard so many accounts from researchers, astronauts, all types of things, from so many camps, field trips, adventures out to the Kennedy Space Center, seeing the launch pads, all types of stuff. And I just always loved space. I loved trying to understand space. It was so far from us, but it was so beautiful. And I feel like that kind of got flipped whenever I just got older and I realized oh my God, look at these microscopes. These things are showing me things that are so small and contribute to the functioning human body. And so around elementary school, I was also identified as a gifted student. And if you've never heard of that, I don't even know if they still have gifted programs anymore. But they just kind of recognize you early on, third, fourth grade, as a kind of expedited learner. You just learn things very quickly. And so at that time, because I was gifted, I was put into classes that or moved into an elementary classroom where I was focusing on math and science instruction, and that was very different. I had to do a lot of problem solving, and I really loved doing it. It was a lot of fun, and I think that was another big point that made me shift to, okay, I really like math and science, like that's really where it's at for me. Around this time is when I definitely started getting into watching documentaries. I loved, and I still do, love Neil deGrasse Tyson and seeing like all his documentaries about space. It's just so wonderful. And I just grew this obsession with like science communication and just understanding like how things worked, like I said before. As well as just like watching YouTube videos about like the mitochondria being the powerhouse of the cell, right? Like just basic biology. Even if I didn't like completely understand what was being said in the video, I was still really excited to be learning. And that's something that like has always been ingrained in me since I was very little. So then in middle school, I went to a magnet school. It was a school about like 30 minutes from my house. So I had to take like a special bus to get there. And I mainly went there because they had a really good basketball program, and I just knew the coaches were great, and they also had a pretty good math and science curriculum, but at the time I was focusing more on my athletics. Simultaneously, because I went to this magnet school, like there was a ton of field trips that we would go to that were math and science related, and that was also a lot of fun. As I got into high school, I started to learn a little bit more about my real interests. So I didn't necessarily want to be a doctor. At some point, I like shadowed an anesthesiologist, and I thought that it was cool, but I also thought it was boring. I thought that I really liked that like problem solving part and piece about science more than the actual application of the science, if that makes sense. I'm sure that a lot of people probably relate to that. But unfortunately at the time, being a doctor was the only career that I had known about that allowed me to keep studying science in the way that I had started to like to study science. But because I had stopped playing basketball, I felt very lost. I didn't necessarily know what my direction was after high school anymore. I knew that I wanted to go to college, but like I just said, I didn't want to be a doctor. And without having career direction, it was really hard for me to get myself to apply for college. And around this time in my junior year is when I ran into Jackie Samani. So Jackie Samani, hopefully she watches this video. Hey girl. She was one of my teachers for anatomy and physiology back in high school. And she was one of the first people that was really probing and asking questions like, okay, so what do you want to do after high school? And like, okay, you like science, but what are you going to do with that? Like, what do you really want to do? And I remember I told her definitively, like, I don't want to be a doctor, but I really love science. I kind of like ran through some things and some ideas with her. And at that time, she had just come back from a conference, I believe, and she told me like, oh, there's this thing at the University of Florida called the Student Science Training Program, and I think you should apply for it. I think it would be great. So SSTP, or the Student Science Training Program, was I don't know if they're still active actually, because I tried to look for the website the other day, not sure. We'll link in the description if it's still active. But it was a training program for about like 70 students. We stayed on campus and we worked underneath graduate students at University of Florida. I was in a material science and engineering lab, so at the time, because my mom was in biomedical engineering, I was like, oh, well, maybe engineering's my thing. And then I got into this engineering lab. I was like, maybe it's not my thing, but I do absolutely love this whole process of coming in every day and thinking about experiments and thinking about what to do next, thinking about how does this literature play into this? What literature am I missing? Trying to dig through sources. Like, I really found myself just loving that process. And even though I wasn't in love with the project that I had, I was so excited to do my presentation by the end of the semester. I definitely applied for that on a whim. And I mention this because you're gonna hear me say that sometimes. And I do feel like it was meant to be, but simultaneously, sometimes whenever you feel called to do something, you should just do it. That is the point. But yeah, I learned a couple things that summer. I learned a lot about graduate research. I didn't really understand like how the PhD process worked at the time, but I just knew that it was an option for me and something that I could strive for. And I learned, funny enough, very side note, that I did not like cancer research at all. And that was just because for the program you're required to take a class as well. And it's a sophomore level class. And the class that I chose was a cancer bio class. And I was just so overwhelmed during that class. It was like the other side of immunology that I had never heard about growing up and was like, this is not for me. And now I'm back in immunology, but not cancer biology. That next year after I finished SSTP, I was completely a dual enrolled student. So I started focusing on trying to complete my AA degree so that I could graduate with my diploma and my degree at the same time, and that's exactly what happened. During that AA degree, I was able to take some other higher level biology classes. I absolutely loved that. I took some psychology classes, and I also took a little bit of classes about community service and different things, and that was a great time and a great opportunity as well. Around the same time, of course, it's my senior year at this point, and it's time to apply for college. I didn't know where I wanted to go to college, so I had a lot of hesitations about going to University of Florida. Once again, another video. I just didn't fall in love with a lot of the universities that I had gone to visit at the time. I knew that I wanted to do science research, and some of the institutions that I went to just did not have research as a focus. That was critical for me because I needed to get more research training in order to go to grad school at this point. So during my senior year, first semester, I got a suggestion from my guidance counselor to apply for University of Miami. And that was another blessing in disguise. I definitely remember like laughing in her face that day and being like, I will never get into that university. That's a joke. And that same day I actually went home and started working on an application. I remember that same year we had a hurricane, and luckily my application was free, and that honestly like changed my life again. So I applied to University of Miami and I got in, and I applied as microbiology and immunology just because I loved microscopes. I loved all the videos and documentaries I used to watch growing up about microbes and like micro life, and I wanted to understand more about that. So I start my career at University of Miami, and I did not love my curriculum. That was something that honestly was out of my control, and I'm sure other universities probably handle this differently, but this specific program, there wasn't a lot of textbooks for us to refer to, and it was mainly verbal teaching and PowerPoints. The lectures were not recorded, so this was all pre-COVID. Your material for the class was basically what your professors were saying, except most of the professors at that university were not native English speakers, so it was very hard to follow a lot of the curriculum. And without the textbooks, I didn't feel a lot of passion towards the microbiome and immunology like I had thought I would before. And so I started looking into other things, and eventually I chose neuroscience. So that is also another story. There's so many videos that could come from this one video and so many tangents. But I switched to neuroscience. I felt that the class options through the neuroscience program were more flexible for me. I could actually learn about more topics that I really wanted to learn about. Once again, my junior year of college this time, I decided to apply for another summer research experience. I was applying for a handful this time, and I got into one, and this is the one that I needed to go to in all honesty. I attended the Washington University BP Indoor program in St. Louis, and that was absolutely amazing. This program is really special because they actually do 2 summers of summer research as well as financially supporting the students throughout the school semester. And Indoor is just an amazing community. The community that they have made at Washington University is so unique, and I can still reach out to them now 3 years after I have done their program, ask them questions, ask them to review my personal statement, and that is a blessing that like I am so grateful grateful for. But I'm gonna definitely share the details about that research experience and probably about the other research experiences as well in another video. And so after that, I completed a senior thesis my senior year. So I was doing more research in a thesis lab about 10 hours a week. And that was also very exciting. It was in neuroscience. It was on a topic that made me realize that I like neuroscience, but I am very niche in the neuroscience world. And that's also something for another video. But that was a great learning opportunity as well, and just getting to practice my science, prepare a paper as well as posters for a presentation, as always, is great training for a researcher. And then it was time for me to apply for grad school. And I applied for a whole bunch of neuroscience programs all across the country. I will definitely talk more about this experience in my application process a little bit later, but the main thing to know is that I got into Harvard and I decided to go to Harvard. Funny enough, Harvard was the only program that I ended up applying biomedical and biological sciences. Once again, more details in another video. And again, you're gonna hear this crazy phenomenon. I applied to Harvard on a whim. Again, I got a free application because I had done BP Endure, and that, again, blessing in disguise. And so yeah, now I am at Harvard working on my PhD. I am a G2, and I'm actually starting officially my lab next week, so I'm really excited to be getting started on my first personal research project to this degree. And I've gotten through and survived G1 in Boston, and that was also an experience that needs to be in another YouTube video. But I hope that through this video you are able to understand a little bit more about my path and journey into research science. You can see that there was no direct path. I kind of stumbled upon things, and I like to say that it's by chance or it's really a blessing, but I do believe that you end up in the right place at the right time. I'm so excited and blessed to be bringing and talking about some of those other topics that I discussed during this video in some future content. But if you like this video, go ahead and smash that like button, click subscribe. Please leave a comment. I would love to hear your comments. I'm already gonna sit down and respond to this other comment that I just received. I look forward to my next video. This has been Monet the Creator, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!